Hello everyone, lovely to meet you all. My name is Jacob. I'm a digital outcome specialist here at Forefront. Forefront is the company behind eShot. With me here today, I have Harry, who's a digital marketing executive, who's going to be demoing some eShot features towards the end. Lurking in the chat, we also have Sadie, who's going to be answering any questions that you might have in the chat live, or if me and Harry pick it up, we'll answer it live as well. So I want to start off by telling you guys a sort of quick story. Story is that 3.5 years ago, my boss set me and the team a task. He said, become accessibility experts. And that's exactly what we've done. We've learned everything there is to know about accessibility. And today we're going to try and teach you guys some of the tips and tricks that we learned along the way. And we're going to be doing a lot of audience participation. So if you guys could make my day and let's just pop some answers in the chat when there's some audience participation things going on, and I'll be really appreciative of that. Okay, so everyone's here, everyone's good. Okay, cool. So moving on. To start off with the agenda. So today we're going to talk about why accessibility is important. We're going to go over color contrast, accessible text, buttons and links, dark mode tips. We're going to play a game of Is This Accessible? And then Harry's going to demo the accessibility features in the eShot. And we're going to have a Q&A section towards the end. So yeah, if you have any questions, save them towards the end or ask them in the chat and they'll be answered live. This session is going to be very similar to the ones I've done previously with Harry. So if you've been to one before, this is ideally going to be the same deck, so it might be a good time to refresh your memory. And if you're new here, welcome. Hope you learned something new today. Okay, so gonna keep going 1 second. So we do these accessibility checks, these email reviews for our customers. So if you are an eShot customer and would like one of these reviews done on your emails, let us know, and there'll also be an opportunity in the follow-up email to respond, and you can get one of these reviews done for yourselves. So to begin, I want to say that accessibility is not optional. For many of you, WCAG 2.2 is a standard that you must adhere to. The Digital Inclusion Act basically means that councils must do whatever possible to produce accessible content. So this means that you must know the basics. And today, I'm going to try my best to put you in the shoes of your audience. So the best way to understand people who may have accessibility needs is to try and put ourselves in their shoes. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. So firstly, there's a question that I always like to ask at the start of these, and here is one of the times I'd like you guys to put something in the chat, please, just so we can see what the audience thinks. What percentage of your audience do you think, on average, has some sort of accessibility need? This is widely generalized, but how many people, what percentage of your audience do you think is visually impaired, has dyslexia? Just if you guys could try for a few percentages in the chat, it would be really interesting to see what you come up with. Okay, we have a 15% from Sean. Thank you, Sean. 5 to 10% from Mike. 20% from Julie. I'm ashamed that I don't know this. Maybe 3%. Victoria says 10%, 1 in 3, 40%, 33%. Okay, very interesting answers we got this time around. Often I get much different answers, and often they're a lot lower actually. So many of you went around the sort of 25, 30%, 40% mark, and then some of you went under the 10% mark. And there's an AI assistant taking notes for someone. Great. Awesome. Using the tech. Hell yeah. Okay, so the answer is actually 20%, which means if you put into numbers, 1 in 5 people on average in the UK have some sort of accessibility need. That is a massive part of your audience, and making content that portion of your audience can consume has never been more important. Imagine your open rates and your click rates are 20% worse or could be 20% worse. You wouldn't want that to happen. You want to make sure that your entire audience can consume the content that you're putting out there. So in the light of putting ourselves in the shoes of our audience, I'm going to show you guys some examples using some M&Ms. So here is how many of us might see color. Here's a picture of some M&Ms, and this is how the regular person who sees the things in the completely normal way would see. However, if you are visually impaired, I'm not going to try say the names of some of these ways of seeing color because I'm going to absolutely butcher it. But I wanted to show you guys these 4 different sections. And you don't need to answer this one in the chat, but one more, ask yourselves, what is the difference between these 4 images? Okay, so they are the same but different in different ways. So I'm just going to give you guys 20 seconds to stare at your screens and tell me, or think to yourselves, what is the same between each picture and what is different between each picture? So I can tell you straight away that the positioning of them is exactly the same on all the pictures. What is the thing that carries over from each picture and what thing doesn't? Just a few seconds to let you guys have a quick think about this. Okay, colors are different, sizes are the same. Okay, so to answer you guys, to basically tell you, font is readable. Ignore the font. Ignore the font. These are the names of the ways of seeing color. So the actual difference is the hue. So if you notice, the hue changes on every single one. So the blues sort of remain the same on these 2. However, it changes. It's the same on this. Changes on this. The things that stay the same are the contrasts. So the lights and the darks always remain the light and dark, but the hue changes. So if you look closely, these light sections on this M&M are the same as the light sections on this M&M, as on this one, as on this one. The thing that changes is the color hue, and that's different. So I'm going to teach you guys some life hacks in a second on how we can sort of make content that everyone can sort of consume and see using these principles. Here's a few good examples of good and bad accessibilities. So this is going to a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. So that's for WCAG WCAG 2.2. If you take a look, the left-hand side is the bad contrast side, meanwhile the right-hand side is the good contrast side. So everyone on the right-hand side has a contrast ratio of above 4.5 to 1 if you were to use a contrast checker, and the left-hand side has under 4.5 to 1. The ones I want you to really take a close look at are mainly these 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Ignore these 2 because these 2, or don't ignore them, but these 2 are very obvious ones. They're very bad contrast and very good contrast. However, the ones here are more confusing. These ones do pass accessibility checks, however, these 2 don't. Although many of us looking at the screen right now could probably see this quite clearly. Also with this one. So how can we tell straight away what's going to be good contrast and what is going to be bad contrast? Basically, the way to design for every type of seeing, every way of seeing color is to assume that everyone sees in black and white. That's a really strange way of seeing it, but when you see everything in black and white, you only see the contrast ratio. So you only see the darks and the lights. So I'll show you some examples in a second. However, if you have a contrast checker, these are some pointers to go by. So if you're going for WCAG 2.2, your graphical objects, so your buttons, your spaces, must have a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. Your large text also requires a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. However, if you are doing body text, you actually need a larger contrast ratio. So body text is smaller, it's thinner than a button, than a heading. So you want a 7 to 1 contrast ratio in order for your text to be quite clearly visible. Basically what you want to be doing is you want to be separating the foreground from the background from the foreground color. It must be a high enough contrast ratio difference in order for, if you were to flip the image in black and white, you'd still be able to, one would be on the light side, one would be on the dark side. So what do I mean by that? Let me show you. Here we have Forfarshire County Council. This is a fake county council that we have created for purposes of demoing. And on the left-hand side, we have 3 different color schemes for Forfarshire County Council. Now, when I flip these into black and white, a different story starts to unfold in front of us. As you can see, some of the ones that might have been very clear on this side are very much no longer clear on this side. Now, this is why it's so important to assume that everyone will see color in black and white, because you can't make images that are perfect for every type of way of seeing color individually. There's no way to tell. But if you focus on the contrast ratios, as you can see, these two fail WCAG, and they end up looking like this when you make them black and white. You can barely see them. But because the background color here is closer to dark color, it goes dark on when you turn it to black and white. And because obviously white has a very high contrast ratio against this, it goes white. So you can very clearly see the background and foreground color are very, very separated. So moving on, your social icons are a quirky feature that you can enhance the accessibility of. What do I mean by that? As you can see in front of us, we have a set of social icons. This is your regular set of social icons. I picked as many as I could. And as you can see, the way they're colored is very different. Each one has a variety of colors. They span basically the entire rainbow. On a white background, it worked completely fine for the most part. All of them are pretty accessible. They're designed to be that way, maybe apart from a Snapchat with the yellow. However, some companies choose to go back to space, some companies don't. But what happens when you've changed the background of your social icons? So let's say your social icons are in the footer of your website, in the footer of your email. Well, then the color starts to change. And so you had a green, these are obviously extremes, and also PowerPoint doesn't do me good with the line around the outside. However, as you can see, if you were to make this black and white, suddenly the circle around the WhatsApp, around the WeChat and the Line chat here start to disappear. If we were to change it to blue, as you can see, our Vimeo, our Telegrams, and our Skype logos start to disappear into the background. Same goes for black with TikTok, Threads, and X. And then also with the dark blue, Facebook and LinkedIn start to fade out. So what can we do to change this? Well, if you're an initial customer, which many of you are, you can go into Smart Editor, click on your social icons, and simply recolor the entire social icon block. And this will change the color of your social icons into one color. Ideally, a dark color, or a very light color, depending on the color of your footer. This will make all of the social icons the same foreground color, and obviously your background color doesn't change, so all of them will be accessible. And that's how you get that variety, that spectrum of colors to be accessible. It's a little quirk, just adds to the accessibility of your footers. So, next one is a question, and here I would like you guys to put some things in the chat if you could, please. So what is the average reading age in the UK? Throw some answers in the chat. Oh, you guys are on point. Minigunning the 9 years old. Wow. This is the most unified crowd I've ever seen on these. Usually answers vary a lot. Okay. So we're pretty unified on 9. You are all correct. The answer is 9. Someone put 8. Yep, but yeah, the answer is 9, which unfortunately means as people who create content, we must write our content to accommodate this, basically. Writing content that is too complicated will not do you any favors when it comes to your audience understanding it. It does very much depend on who are your audience. If you're in professional spaces and have a very corporate audience, this might differ. However, if your audience is regular residents where you incorporate basically everyone, you should aim for your content to be as understandable as possible. So for that, you can obviously make content short, more concise, easier to understand. You can use hashtags correctly and in order as well. Make sure you structure your content logically, and also read your content like a screen reader would. So including the image and link alt text. So if you go into eShot, you can also very easily change alt text and headings by just clicking on the block and just selecting from the drop downs. Here is quite a good example of what I mean when I say heading structure. Many people think that heading structure means, let me go, well, this is my first heading, this is my second heading, this is my third heading, this is my fourth heading, this is my fifth heading. And that is an incorrect way of thinking about it, or incorrect way of doing it. The example on screen is hopefully an example that everyone can understand quite easily. And if you see, if you see here, it's basically a system of folders. So my H1 is my main sort of folder, main article piece, animals by breed. Then we go dogs, cats, and horses as my H2s. And then the more granular of those is the H3, so the golden retrievers, the poodles, etc. And this is how you should be aiming to structure your content. If you have a main article, it should be your H1. If you have a sub article in that one, that should be a H2. If that one ends up having even more headings, there should be H3s. And also, you can completely obviously go H1, H2, H3, and then go H1, H2, H3, or H1, H2 again. It's just as long as you're following this folder structure of it being these Russian dolls, where this is the main category, this is the breakdown, this is the more granular. Let's talk about dyslexia. Let me take a quick sip of water real quick. So, how many people do you think in the UK, on average, have dyslexia? Throw some answers in the chat, please, so we can see. This can be a percentage or out of 10 or out of 100. How many people do you think have dyslexia on average in the UK? 10%, 1 in 4, 15%, 20, 15, 1 in 5, 10%. Okay, interesting answers. You guys are much more accessibility conscious than every other crowd we've had, because a lot of the answers are spot on. It is actually 1 in 10 people. So 1 in 10 people struggle with dyslexia. This makes things quite a lot harder to understand in certain scenarios. So here's an email that I designed, and it's just a template email. However, I made the padding really small. I crunched all of the text together. And then what I actually did about a year ago when I designed this slide initially was I took this email and I showed my girlfriend. My girlfriend has quite heavy dyslexia, and walls of text and closely spaced content tends to stress her out. She tends to get like quite annoyed about it when she has to read through quite a big amount of content. And I showed her this email, and she got visually stressed out. It is just because it's so crammed together, everything starts to sort of merge into one. You can very easily have the same content, but just apply that little bit more padding. And what that will do is that will give everything that bit more breathing room. And guess what? It doesn't matter if you have dyslexia or not. The email on the right is much better to read for everyone. You're making better content for your audience by letting your content breathe. Obviously, don't go too crazy on the padding, but some padding never hurts. So if you look at your content and everything's quite squished together, apply some top and bottom padding. Give that content some breathing room. As you can see, it can result in it looking much better. And I have actually seen many emails like this in the past, and it's just such an easy change to get it to look like this. And we're doing on time, 20 minutes, okay. So padding settings, obviously, if you are using eShot and go to Smart Editor, we have very in-depth settings inside Smart Editor for buttons, structures, containers. You can basically put padding and on some things inner padding as well. And it's very simple to do that. Just go to the right-hand bar and apply your settings there. So why do we use alt text? Accessibility is a big one. Obviously, we want to tell people who cannot see the image what is there when they're using a screen reader. However, apart from that, there are other reasons too. See, so the first reason is a screen reader. However, the next reason is actually search engines. Search engines crawl alt text to be able to decide what the content is about, how it should position. So applying alt text to your images in many cases actually can help your SEO. If there's and then broken images as well. I don't know if you guys have ever opened an email in the corporate space where images are blocked and suddenly the email just looks like a bunch of question marks and you can't see anything there. When there's broken images, if there's alt text, you can actually hover on that broken question mark and it will tell you what image should be there from the alt text. This is also very helpful if someone has bad internet connection, they're on a mobile, they're in bad reception area, and their images don't load. Alt text will be able to show up and tell people what image should have been there. And obviously, changing alt text in eShop is very, very simple, as is doing everything in Smart Edit. So you just click on the image, the link, or the video, and apply your alt text in the right-hand bar. But let's talk about alt text for a second, because it's a very, very important one to talk about. Many people are too literal with their alt text. Many people are too sparing with their alt text. Let me give you an example. Let's say we have some fish on the screen, right? Let's say we were to do we're reading a PDF or reading a web page about fishing competitions, and on every single picture, the fish was labeled fish at swimming competition. That wouldn't tell you anything as to what fish that was, where it was caught, how much it weighed. It wouldn't give you the context needed in order for you to appreciate the value of that image. It will just tell you that there's a fish on the screen. So you want to be doing very descriptive alt text. You want to be saying that the fish was a carp, that it weighed 10 kilos and was caught in 15 seconds. I don't know, but you want to put some kind of information in there just so if that image doesn't load and your content doesn't hold that information, the alt text can still support the content. Okay, so buttons are king. The average thumb size on a mobile, obviously we have different size people are different sizes. Some people have a smaller thumb, some people have a larger thumb. So 44 to 72 pixels is the average thumb size on mobile, which I don't know how big your screens are, but if you have a 1080p screen, will be about this. Sometimes can be the size of this box for some people, but obviously for many people will be about half that because this is the upper limit. Which means when you're trying to press things, so when you're trying to press links inside your text, if you've hyperlinked something and haven't used a button, people with larger finger sizes might be clicking the line underneath. They might be clicking the line above. They might start scrolling by trying to click your link. By using a button, you now provide more pixels on the screen to press. You provide more real estate to click, and that actually leads to a higher click rate. So use buttons more is the learning from this, really. Buttons over hyperlinked text. Also, if you're hyperlinking text, make sure that it's bold. Make sure that it can be bold. It doesn't need to be bold if your accessibility ratio is good, but make sure your accessibility ratio is good. If your accessibility ratio isn't good, make it bold to make the text stand out. Often links are a different color. Often they're blue. Often they can be purple to match your branding or something. Make sure that that link text is also accessible. But if you do want a higher open rate, prioritize using buttons where possible. You get high click-throughs, it'll make people easier to click, it'll be easier to click the button. There's no real reason why not to use buttons in your emails. But if you are going to use buttons, let's use them properly. As you can see here, we have a few examples. On the left-hand side, the accessible ones, so browse campsites, or read our full mission. You have to provide some sort of context about where the button is going to take people. Instead of saying read more, learn more, visit page, don't say these things. They're not accessible. They don't help people at all to tell them where they're taking them. If you say read the blog on our website, visit our pricing page, for example, on the eShop website, you can provide more context as to where you are taking the audience, and especially if they're reading it with a screen reader, that just helps so much more to know, okay, I actually want to visit that website, I actually want to go ahead with that button. Hyperlinks. So yeah, use a button where possible. If you cannot use a button, make sure that your contrast ratio is at least 7:1, assuming this will be body text. WebAIM actually created this image to show you what a good hyperlink is, what a bad hyperlink is, and what a terrible hyperlink is, where you don't make it even clickable. But if it's clickable, you want to make it descriptive. Visit WebAIM's link text article for details. Very descriptive, tells you exactly where you should be going. A very important thing is test, test, and test. Inside eShop, we have the preview feature where you can preview your emails in over 40 different email clients. This is key to see how does my email look on a different phone? How does it look on a tablet? How does it look in dark mode? How does it look inside Yahoo as compared to Gmail? Sometimes these things may differ, and it's important to preview your emails in the different modes to make sure that everything is accessible. Oftentimes, accessibility goes wrong is when dark mode is not respected. Most people that use mobile phones these days use dark mode. But this means that the chances are your email will probably flip into dark mode. And this means that when your email does flip into dark mode, you want to make sure that people can still see the content that you want them to see. As you can see here, Google does this quite well, where it flips completely and everything here is still visible. The contrast ratios are still intact. However, this company here, see my company, when this logo here flips, it completely vaporizes into the background. You don't want to be this organization. So what some companies have done is, if there is a possibility of using two logos, then they've done that. But there is actually some life hacks where you can only use one image and one logo in order to make it accessible on both. And let me teach you guys that. Here I have our trusty Forefront Shire County Council logo. Here I've dark mode flipped it, and as you can see, it's really fading out against our background. What I can do, however, is put this tiny white line around it, which means that in dark mode it will be visible. But if I was to flip this back onto light mode, as you can see, the background completely absorbs that line, making this logo accessible in both light mode and dark mode, and I managed to only use one image. Obviously, you change the color of this line to the same color as the background that you're going to use the logo on, which is a very easy life hack to make sure that your logos are accessible. Okay, I'm nearly done, guys. Nearly soon over to Harry. Let's play a quick game before I do hand over to Harry, though. This is where, if you guys could, let's have as much audience participation as possible. We're going to go through 7 questions, and it'll be interesting to test your knowledge. Okay, so we're going to play accessible or not. Here I have the Forefront Shire County Council logo, and I want to ask you guys, is this background accessible to this foreground color? So what contrast ratio would this be? Okay, well, I'm going to go for a contrast ratio of 4.5 to 1. So is this over 4.5 to 1? You can do yes or no in the chat. Would you consider this to be accessible? These will get harder as we go along. We have a few no's and a few yeses. Okay. There were loads of yeses and a few no's. All right, so for this one, the answer, contrast ratio is actually 13 to 1, making this a very accessible, and this would look very good if you were to flip it to black and white. Okay, let's go again. This time, making it a little bit harder. Now, let's go yes or no's again. See what you guys think. Is this accessible? Yes or no? Loads of yeses. 1 no. Loads of yeses. Thank you for the very fast responses. Really appreciate it, guys. Okay, most people said yes. The answer is actually yes. This is completely accessible. Getting a little bit harder now. It's really testing you guys' knowledge there. What do we think? We have a lot of yeses. Okay, so this was a moment where, as a collective, everyone got it wrong. It's actually not accessible. This would be a contrast ratio of 3.31 to 1, which means it's under 4.5 and would not pass WCAG 2.2. But it does look to the eye like it would. Remember, turn this into black and white. Suddenly you see that this color is very bright and this color is very bright. Both of these would end up sort of looking very similar. Nope, this one's not accessible. Next one up. Like I said, these get a lot harder. We have a no. We have another no. We have a yes, we have a no. We have another yes. Okay, so 50-50 in on this one. Interesting, interesting. Okay, lots of yeses, lots of no's. We have a C. Yes. All right. Thank you everyone for answering. So we're about 50-50 split between yes and no. This one, is a little bit of a trick because it's very close to being a no, but it is a yes. So it's a 4.57 to 1, which means it's over 4.5, which would actually be accessible. But I admit that because that's very hard to decide with the raw human eye. Okay, this one. I've done something here. Something's changed. Okay, what do you guys think? Okay, we have a bunch of notes. Okay, so let's explain this one. What has changed actually? There is a gradient in the background, and this means the contrast ratio is a question mark. Because if you were to test a white against this blue color, it'll be different than you would test white against this purpley color, and you would test white against this pink color, and you would test white against this magenta almost color. Which means that the contrast ratio actually differs on each part of this image, which means this is actually one, not accessible, but two, different accessibility ratios across the whole thing. So you want to avoid putting solid colors on non-accessible gradient backgrounds. If this was an accessible gradient, so if this color was accessible and it faded into another color that's accessible, it'd be completely fine with having a white logo on there. However, yeah, because it's a white logo, no. If you were to have a black logo in this scenario, I imagine this would actually be very accessible. So it does very much depend on the colors. Do use contrast checkers. Make sure to check your colors. We do actually have a built-in contrast checker inside eShot as well that Harry will be demoing later onto you. Okay, so one of the last things I want to say is whenever you are creating content, you must consider how 100% of your audience consumes that content. Imagine you had an accessibility need. You would be disappointed every single time an organization ignored your needs, but every time you'd be pleasantly surprised when an organization made an effort and added the alt text. They added descriptive alt text that it was pleasant to read. You'd appreciate that every single time. That organization suddenly goes into that person's good books, and this could be as much as 20% of your audience, if not more. So making accessible content really does help you make better content. And we do have plenty of assets to help you succeed. So if you go through the eShot website, and we also send out some assets in the follow-up email as well. We have an email accessibility checklist that you can tick off, make sure you've done everything to make sure that your email is accessible. Also, we have a bunch of blog posts, and there's some different structures and frameworks that you can use, such as Sculpt, to make sure that you are remembering all of those key accessibility pillars and always utilizing them when creating content. On our blog, we have Sculpt for accessibility, which goes through Sculpt. We have the drop curve effect, and also what's new WCAG 2.2. We are constantly adding new posts into our blog, so make sure you sign up to our customer newsletter and check the blog frequently. So thank you everyone for listening to my TED Talk and listening to me monologue for a little bit. I'm going to say thank you from me here and hand over to Harry, who's going to do a demo of the eShot platform to you. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Jacob. My screen should be coming through now. You should be seeing the eShot's design page. To start us off, I'm going to start with something not related to your actual designs, but a way that can actually help make eShot itself more accessible to you and other users. So up in the top right-hand corner, you'll see this little icon here, which is labeled accessibility. If you open this up, you'll get a few different options, and this actually helps to make eShots itself more accessible if you do have any needs yourself. So to cover a few of the key ones, we've got bigger text, which if I click on that, you see the text on my page just zooms in a little bit more the more I click on this. We've got text spacing, which again sort of puts some more space in between each character the more I click on this option. And then we do also have the dyslexia friendly font, which if I click on this, completely changes the font of everything on the eShot page. And those are a few of the key ones, but there are a few other options in here which you can play around with for yourselves. But I'll just reset all those and we'll jump into the eShot design. And to begin, I'm going to start on alt text. So yeah, as Jacob's already mentioned, alt text should be descriptive where possible. but obviously that can vary depending on the image you use. So for example, your logo I've got as the forefront logo because, well, that's pretty self-explanatory. Whereas my key image here, I've got the eShot on a laptop screen with an emo design popping out of the screen. So obviously this is a much more of an image that needs describing, whereas the logo is sort of, yeah, it just explains itself really. And following on down, I'm going to touch on headings, and I've followed the same example as Jacob's gone with earlier. So I've gone with my heading 1 of animals by breed, my heading 2 of dogs, and then I've got a couple of different dog breeds: golden retriever, cockapoo, and bulldog. So yeah, again, you sort of want to follow the Russian doll structure here. So my main heading of the article is animals by breed, which you can see up in the top hand corner. I've got heading 1 set here, and it's a size of 30. But if we drop down to my sort of subcategory of dogs, it's set to a heading 2 and slightly smaller text. And again, the subcategory from dogs is a golden retriever. I've set to a heading 3 and slightly smaller text again. Whereas with the cockapoos and bulldogs, I've kept as a heading 3 because we're not jumping to a different subsection there. And if I follow on down a little bit more, again, the social icons. So here you can see I've gone with the blue branding color on my footer. So the Facebook and LinkedIn logo in particular, as well as the X, sort of blend into the background. And what you can do here is on the right-hand side, when you clicked on your container, you can change both the size of your social icons if you want to make them larger, but you can also change them to black, or in this case, I would probably want some white logos to make them accessible. And we do also have the option to choose custom icons if you wanted to choose your own color of your social icons here. And now I'm going to scroll back to the top of my design, and you've probably seen, as I've been scrolling through, that some sections I've labeled as inaccessible and some sections I've labeled as accessible. So what I'm going to do now is demo our accessibility preview feature, which helps to basically point out to you if any of your text or buttons are inaccessible within your design. And to access this, just click the preview button. I'm sure you're all used to this page when you're testing your designs. Just give this a moment to load. And on the right-hand side here, we've got the accessibility tab. So I'm just going to click on that. And we'll see here that eShot is actually telling me that I've got 5 color contrast fails within my design, failing for WCAG AA, and I've got 5 instances of that. And obviously that's all well and good, but if I wasn't to be labeling the text to you, how would you know if this is inaccessible? So we've got this highlight button on the right-hand side, which when I click this, it kindly puts a red box around all of my inaccessible text within my design. So these links, this button, and the text at the top here, which again is all well and good, but how can you go about fixing this? So I'm just going to unhighlight this. And you'll see on the right-hand side here, there's this little details link, which I'm just going to open up. And on this page, it gives you a bit of detail as to what the issue is, but there is a built-in color contrast checker. There are a few online, but yeah, they should all follow the same guidelines. So what I'm going to do to demo this is just copy my inaccessible color from eShot and paste that hex into here. As you can see, changes here, and we can again see this fails WCAG AA. So to make this as accessible as possible, I'm just going to use the slider to get it as close as possible to the blue I'm using, but just make it accessible. So I'm going to carry on dragging, and eventually it will pass WCAG AA. So what I'm going to do is copy the hex value it's given me, head back to my design, and we're going to change the text color to that color, which you can see changes. Just going to let that save. I'm going to preview my design again. And again, head to the accessibility tab, and we can see now that it's changed to 4 instances. And if I use the highlight button, this heading at the top here is no longer inaccessible. So yeah. So this is just a really handy way. We always recommend once you finish your design or during, just use the preview button up on the top middle corner. And yeah, you've got the links. You can also check here, but the accessibility tab is the key one. So that's sort of all the ways you can help to check your designs, but also make sure they are accessible within eShot. So yeah, we'll open up the floor to any questions on Jacob's presentation or any questions on eShot itself.
Thank you very much, everyone. That's it for this session. We'll send over the slides and the recording Thank. No questions, but very informative sessions. Many thanks. Many thanks for joining us. Thank you, everybody. I wish you the lovely rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Have a good one.